Hello again, I am Blunty. In a video yesterday about how the Nintendo Switch Neon was already sold out, amongst some surrounding issues, I also talked about the Nintendo Switch Pro Controller, about how it itself has apparently started selling out its pre-order stock, at least in a few places in the United States. So far, it seems, as far as I can tell, it hasn't sold out here in Aussie land, but it certainly could. Stock, after all, is not infinite and demand seems to be high. Now, from my personal perspective, this was a slight concern because while I had planned to get a Pro Controller, I wasn't planning to do so immediately on launch day. Mainly because I wanted to force myself to use the Joycons in their Comfort Grip control pad mode to see how they fare long term. And if I had the Pro Controller, I feel I'd be pretty less likely to do so because obviously it would be inherently the superior experience. But with the Pro Controller selling out in some places, the FOMO started to set in, and I started to weaken on my resolve to hold out. Yesterday afternoon, during another session of the Pokemon Gold live playthrough I'm currently doing over on Twitch, I talked about the one very real and very practical reason I could rationalize getting a Pro Controller sooner than I'd expected. And that self-rationalization goes like this. The game I'm getting at launch, at least not including whatever I pick up on the Virtual Console, if indeed we do get Virtual Console stuff at launch, and with 2 weeks to go till launch, we still have zero clue what the effing deal is there. Classic Nintendo. Just communicate with us, please. But the big game I'm getting at launch is Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, a game I do in fact have experience playing on both Joy-Cons and the Pro Controller, in the same session in fact, so I could directly and immediately compare them side by side, like for like. And while indeed the Joy-Cons were, in fact, better than I expected, they actually work really nicely, there is one complaint I made about them specifically in respect to playing Zelda, an issue that the Pro Controller solves. And it's the right thumbstick. In Zelda, you use that to take manual control over the camera. And with the Joy-Cons designed the way they are, to be narrow and slim, the right thumbstick sits directly under the main action button array. The result of doing this makes moving your thumb quickly between adjusting the camera and back to performing actions a little bit awkward. You have to kind of bend your thumb in at the knuckle to do so. And yes, I know this sounds like a small, tiny, nitpicky thing, but unless you've tried it yourself, please withhold judgment. You may find, as indeed I did, and I wasn't expecting this, that a couple of decades of muscle memory make this feel really quite unnatural. The Pro Controller, however, has the much more standard positioning of the right thumbstick placed in an offset to allow your thumb to naturally and easily sweep laterally across its own natural arcing range of movement to land right on that thumbstick. This is of course exactly why controllers have stayed with this offset layout, though of course some, like PlayStation, swap the left side stick and D-pad positions around, and you can argue all day which is better for you, symmetrical or offset, but in either case they're offset from one another and always to accommodate that natural sweep of the thumb. It's simple ergonomics. Something the Joy-Con, again because of its inherent need to be slender, could not do this without adding significant bulk, something Nintendo obviously wanted to avoid. And even with the Comfort Grip, which makes the Joy-Con sit in your hand more like a traditional controller, it cannot of course move the thumbstick to a more natural position. And in a game like Zelda, a big, fat, open-world action-adventure game designed to make you want to just sink into it for nice, long play sessions, which is also a game where using the camera manually to look around will be something done frequently and quite vitally, that little ergonomic quirk of the Joy-Cons could in fact become a very real comfort issue. And there it is. A justification, a rationalization, a legitimate enough reasoning to allow my pride to weaken enough for me to give in to that nasty, manipulative FOMO seeping into the corners of my mind. There's also the fact that the Pro Controller is, for now, the only way to get a legitimate and proper D-pad. Not so vital for Zelda, which uses this for on-the-fly inventory swapping and the like, and the Joy-Con left-side buttons work just fine for that, of course. But for Virtual Console games, and upcoming titles like Street Fighter II Ultra, which, by the way, I did play, deliberately choosing to try the thumbstick, even though it was set up with the Pro Controllers, which do have the proper D-pad, which some people in other videos where I've shown this footage have given me some shit about, but dudes, I'm old school. I know the D-pad is the real and proper way to play this. Actually, an arcade stick is the real and proper way to play this. But I chose to use the thumbsticks deliberately, precisely because I knew the Joy-Con buttons, the default controller for the system that everyone will have, don't have a D-pad. And the left side buttons are no replacement for a proper D-pad in games like this. So I wanted to see how the game fared with the less ideal thumbstick. And it was actually fine. But in some other Virtual Console games, that very likely won't be the case. Some games designed for systems that only had D-pads really do suck quite severely with the sloppier, less digitally precise analog thumbsticks. But in the wider picture, the Virtual Console issues are secondary, as we don't even know what titles are there and from what systems, so it's not super relevant to talk in detail about that right now in this context. It will be an issue, but we don't have enough information to really dig into it. So, although my intent was to give the Joy-Con a fair go in the Comfort Grip controller configuration, and while I'm sure I'll be able to adjust my muscle memory to the new position of the thumbstick while playing Zelda, I already know from first-hand experience that the Pro Controller is much better in this context. It's more natural, it's more ergonomic, and I suspect it will be less prone to cause that old friend of the gamer, the thing we have that's as close as we ever get to a sports injury, the controller claw hand strain. So, do I need a Pro Controller? I think I am managing to convince myself that I will, in fact, benefit in a real and practical way from getting one at launch. But how about you folk? Do you feel you need it? Have the issues I talked about here changed your mind in either way? Have you tried it for yourself? Did you get a chance to do what I did and try the Joy-Cons and Pro Controller side by side in the same game at the same session? As FOMO gives way to self-rationalization, I feel slightly annoyed with myself, but also justified in wanting the best play experience from the Switch I can manage. The Nintendo Switch is, after all, built on compromises to make it work well as a handheld and a TV console device, because it is, of course, a hybrid device. It has to do both things at least okay, and that inherently means compromises. But at least some of those compromises can be sidestepped if you're willing to spend some more goddamn money. Now, this isn't Nintendo being insidious or greedy or something, it's just the compromises that were practical to make on this thing, that needed to be made on this thing, to let it be what Nintendo wanted it to be. I suppose it's just a nice bonus for Nintendo that it means they get to ping folk like me another 100 beer purchasing currency units for another controller. Capitalism. Thanks for watching, I am Blunty, and I will catch you next time.